This is eCoffee with Experts, where marketers and founders share what's actually working in SEO, AI, and digital growth. Grab your coffee and fuel your mind as we chat with top minds about their wins, struggles, and lessons you won't find in a blog post. Brought to you by Digital Web Solutions, we bring real talk to help you grow your business, one episode at a time. Let's get started.
Jeff Hirz, Executive Vice President of Business Development at OuterBox, coming to us from Ohio. Welcome to eCoffee with Experts.
Thanks for having me, Austin. Good to be here.
It's always good to talk with a fellow Ohioan. I know I'm in for a good conversation, as is the audience. Tell us, Jeff, what do you spend your time thinking about mostly these days?
Where the mind goes, and I kind of with a question like that.
I told you I was going to lob you softballs at first.
I don't know.
I lied.
I don't know if that's a softball.
No, I lied. It's fine.
Yeah. No, the reality is anymore in the current market environment, the sales environment has been so challenging the past 2 years in the face of just macroeconomic pressures and now tariffs this year. So it's just been, honestly, it's been a wild ride. So day to day, where my brain is constantly thinking about, and where we're trying to evolve forward into, is really just how do we maintain lead equity? How do we maintain the growth trajectory that we forecast ourselves for in order to hit these targets? And it's every day. It's kind of like new ideas, coming up with new ideas, identifying new lead sources, shoring up existing stratagem, right? And making sure that everything you've been doing that's proven itself out over the past 10, 20 years continues to prove itself out. So it's a lot of new initiatives. It's a lot of reshoring. It's a constant challenge, but a fun one.
Yeah, of course. You mentioned something about lead sources, and I want to dive right into that because agencies, it has always been a constant challenge of where do we find leads? Referrals tend to be the top lead source for most agencies, at least in the growth phase. But I'm curious, since OuterBox is a little bit maybe further along, what does lead source look like for you these days?
Yeah, great question, Austin. I've been at OuterBox about 8 years now, and for 7 of those 8 years, we were 95% an inbound organization where we did so well in the organic rankings that we would just have MQLs coming in all day, every day, based on from organic search. That was our bread and butter, our golden goose, if you will. And, that didn't really change until this year, until 2025. So we definitely saw the organic deprecation start at the beginning of the year, but really just jump off a cliff in March with the resurgence of AI overviews and those being that much more prominent. We ranked for a lot of really good informational content. That was where a lot of our focus went, was this top of funnel, just informational content to educate the audience, add value. And that traffic just basically disappeared over the course of 3 or 4 months. So our MQL volume subsequently followed. It was an interesting drop, if you will, because as much as the raw MQL volume dropped significant, we're talking more than 50, 60% over the course of 3 or 4 months. The quality of the MQL actually rose. And so it's kind of an interesting paradigm where you're not getting those informational queries coming to your site anymore, but also when they would fill out a form or reach out, they were typically a less qualified lead, right? Because they're still kind of in research mode. They're not necessarily in ready to buy mode. So we did see the quality of the lead go up from a ratio perspective. Overall, organic lead volume just fell off a cliff. And we've seen that with other agencies. I talked to a lot of their agency owners who are seeing the same thing. And so it's somewhat validating. We're like, all right, it's not like we're doing something horribly wrong. It's definitely there's an environmental component here. So the challenge for the past, really since May or June, when we started aggressively acting on it, was lead diversification. That's been basically almost where 80% of my brain goes every day, is like, what are other lead sources? What are partnerships we can form? Exploring cost per lead programs that I've always historically been very against due to quality issues. So we've thankfully started to see a resurgence in a lot of those leads. So we had a little weird couple months there where, as organic MQLs were dropping, we started to see very low, mild lifts in MQLs from other sources. We're at a point now, thankfully, we've started to level out a little bit, where we have probably about 9 or 10 MQL sources beyond organic and paid, which is always our bread and butter, where we're still proving it. We're proving it out, right, from a pipeline perspective, from an actual sales perspective. But that's been our saving grace for the past couple months. That's what's allowed us to kind of stay afloat, stay on target, and keep shooting towards that end of year sales target, that the dreaded quota. Thankfully, I'm trying to hit. So
yes, dude, that's always great to hear. When you're talking about, I think a lot of people saw that, like you mentioned, a lot of agencies that you talked to just saw the MQLs drop off a cliff with the zero click environment, not as much traffic is coming to the website. What's the thought process behind getting into AI overviews, LLMs? Is there a change in content strategy, or how do you approach that?
That's a great question. Yeah. So, I live at the intersection of marketing and sales, right? And so this year, my attention has had to shift very much more towards marketing. And that point, how do we get more appearances, more citations and LLMs? And it's definitely been a challenge this year. It's something we've had to really lean into our own SEO team to help us understand the best way to execute on that. Thankfully, a lot of our informational content is already being cited in a lot of the large language models.
Mm,
So we actually have it was as much as you saw organic traffic do this, you saw traffic from LLMs do subsequently this. So it's kind of leveled out. Traffic's still down overall. But for us, it just comes down to there's a lot more of an offsite focus, right? I think it's something like 75% of citations for an individual website are offsite. So we've
mm.
leaned into a lot more third-party listing services, which, are, again, I've always been somewhat against because they're pay to play. I've never liked that. However, they do seem to work. And we did definitely see we reinitiated that strategy probably 2 months ago, and just really in the past few weeks, it took a little bit to gain some traction. The past few weeks, we use AccuLLM with an AccuRanker to track citations and to track our forward progress there, and we're definitely seeing a lift subsequently. We've gone a little hog wild with third party listings in that sense, and we say if we're going to go, we're going to go all in. We went
Yeah.
all in, and it's going to be bearing fruit. Now, on the MQL standpoint, it's not necessarily translating directly, but we are seeing at least increases in citations, increases in top line visibility.
You mentioned AccuLLM as a rank tracker for LLM visibility. I know there are a couple tools there. Just curious, like a short question, like why did you choose AccuLLM?
We're already with AccuRanker. That's our preferred partner for
Okay.
it's our primary keyword tool. So it was a very natural transition in AccuLLM and for prompt tracking. So we're still kind of somewhat new to it. The tool itself is still relatively new, just like all these tools are, and that's part of the problem. It's with such a nascent industry. It's like what tools are going to rise to the top? It's like going back to 2000, and you had Google on par with Yahoo and LexisNexis, and you had all these search engines that were kind of at an even playing field before Google really pulled out to be front and center. So it's kind of been an interesting race to watch, but we're leaning into the tool that we've been using for the past few years, which seems to be it's a solid play for us.
Yeah, yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. You were talking about the MQLs for your own business, and agencies has been traditionally hard to get leads for. But when you're doing organic and SEO and other, generation strategies for businesses,
Mhm.
how do you advise them on lead diversification, if that's even a conversation, which I'm sure it is?
Yeah, yeah, we definitely take the trusted advisor approach to our client relationships. As much as we're their SEO vendor or their paid media vendor, we definitely like to be treat it more as a partnership, right? It's a very overused term, but like we want to be an extension of your team, but we actually do, and in a lot of ways, we actually are. So we definitely advise our clients, get on third party websites, get on Reddit, get on Quora, start engaging there, to help boost some of the deprecation we've seen across the board with organic visibility. In a sense of diversification, we absolutely advise on that, and we're very niche focused. We have a certain subset of niches that we do very well in. So advising on various forums that we know they can go and engage on, and partnerships to forge with, like for example, industrial with the PMA or the FMA, right? Leaning into those partnerships to diversify their own lead sources. Hit or miss if they take our advice on that or not. So it is technically outside the realm of necessarily what we do within organic search or website development or email marketing, what have you. But they've been productive conversations. And that's something I've noticed really in the past 3-4 months as I talk to a lot of C-suite folks, agency owners, business owners. It's the conversations have shifted significantly. There's much more
Mm,
of a vulnerability than there ever used
mm,
to be. Used to be they were very kind of hard hitting sales conversations. Who can flex more, right? Now it's like, what are you doing? Well, here's what I'm doing, right? And
mm.
it's much more just candid, open conversations. That's been honestly really refreshing because this is a massive change this industry has seen. The largest change since the .com boom, I would imagine. So the largest change in 20 plus years to digital marketing that we're all just learning to navigate together.
Yeah, it's a really cool. I mean, like I said, it's a big challenge, but it's also a big opportunity.
Oh yeah.
And just to, you can see it in LLMs, like they are prioritizing and putting more weight on user generated content, which is typically more real content. It's not as polished, and it's really cool to hear that that's coming from inside as well, like the agency side as well. Are you in any? I mean, as Jeff, are you in any professional organizations or private communities or anything like that where you can have these conversations?
For the most part, honestly, I just reach out to a lot of like folks just via LinkedIn to try to have conversations. And for the most part, like I said, these folks are open. Chamber of
Mm,
Commerce type stuff, those types of conversations, absolutely. Some professional orgs, but for the most part, a lot of the conversations have just been happening organically. Folks I meet at conferences, at trade shows. That man, as soon as you start to like open up and tell about some of the struggles you've seen in the face of that, man, the floodgates just open. They're like, well, here's what I've seen, and then they've been just been
mm,
very organic conversations. Nothing I've necessarily had to manufacture,
mm.
if you will. It comes up organically, but there's 2 to 3 folks I'm talking to every single week, or just, it's idea exchange, free flow of information both ways. And there's tons of learnings you get from those types of conversations. There's these little anecdotes that we've acted on and we've incorporated into our strategy just based
Mm.
on a conversation I had with a random person at a Chamber of Commerce meeting, or I saw a LinkedIn post from a second connection. I reached out with my message. I offered to have a quick chat, and they take you up on it anymore.
Yeah.
Used to be this kind of gated feeling of like, even like a LinkedIn outreach, like, oh, they're just trying to sell me. And yes, that is 90% of connections. They're trying to sell you. I've noticed just more of that openness, that honesty, that candor, that, if you lead with that, it's received very well. So for the most part, it's just kind of, just been a very strong organic evolution for us.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool to hear. Leading with vulnerability, it takes courage. And I think more people are leaning into that right now. I mean, especially online, we don't really know what's real and what's not, even all the way up to politics. I saw from the real Donald Trump Instagram account, like there was an AI generated version of him saying something. It was taken down. But I was like, oh my gosh, like
Oh yeah.
what is happening?
Well, look
Yeah.
at Cracker Barrel. Look at the Cracker Barrel fiasco. That was bots. Bots
Yeah.
initiated them. It was like
Well,
some third percentage of the chatter around the Cracker Barrel logo was just bots. It was not real people. So it was manufactured. It was not truly this uproar that it was made out to be in the media. So
wow.
it's yeah, what's real?
Yeah, exactly. What is real? Let's switch over a little bit toward the sales aspect of things. Probably one of the most important things that you can do as an executive or as a leader of a business is surround yourself with the right people. Get the right people in the room. Like you said, there's no real playbook for this new post AI world. So there's no one with really deep experience in AI unless you're working at a lab. And even then, like these things are moving so fast.
Right.
So getting the right people around you who have the same ambition and the same value set to solve these problems is ultimately one of the most valuable things you can do. How do you think tying that thought in with the leads shifting from MQLs and inbound, you've kind of shifted to a little more of an outbound and now you have a team that you're running with. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we very accidentally timed a shift in our marketing strategy to be more top of funnel, more awareness at the start of the year.
Hmm.
And that, they came in a couple different forms. On the marketing side, it came more on the sense of like more just brand awareness, thought leadership content. That honestly we timed nearly, again, very accidentally timed nearly perfectly with this shift in organic search. And then more on the sales side, it's honestly, like I said, it's just been these more honest conversations we've been having with folks. And we've been encouraging our reps to do more outbound, to do more cold calling, to do more outreach, to go visit industrial parks, to go visit, prospects who maybe are, you would having trouble getting a hold of, or whatever. And that's honestly been the key to a lot of our success this year. We have a strong subset of reps here who they've been in the game for 20 plus years, right? These are a lot of old school, like industrial type guys who used to work for Thomas Registry, who now sell, paid media services for OuterBox. And it's been just a lot more boots on the ground. Like I said, it's the last 2 years has become this very challenging sales environment, as I mentioned. And so what we're finding is that you have to kind of revert somewhat to just more, it's just the relationship anymore. That's truly ultimately what it comes down to, is that relationship. And our more successful reps are the ones that are finding ways to cultivate that relationship, to build the rapport with the client. And again, it just keeps coming back to this: just be candid, be open, be honest with your struggles, with your vulnerabilities, with the opportunities you see. And that's really where we've been finding a lot of our, we'll say, anecdotally, right, if you will, but a lot of our success. A lot of these reps come with their war stories. And it almost
Mm,
always starts with this conversation around, he started, all these things started bubbling up naturally in conversation. They got emotional, they got upset, they got vulnerable. And then it just turned into this amazing conversation. That's what folks want. They want connection, they want validation. And ultimately, if you're just going through the normal sales rigmarole and you're just trying to close them to meet your quota, those are your worst performers.
yeah, and what I've seen, because personally I've been in conversations where I am the prospect, like, yeah, probably more often than not. And what I notice is the sales cycle is a bit longer, but the people who are really there to provide value for me and they're not going through some sort of a script, I tend to trust them more. And it could be a month or 6 months later, like ultimately I've moved forward with the businesses who I feel I can trust and who
Yeah.
haven't pushed me. Because man, like if you look at this triangle, only 3% of the market is ready and like they're in the right time to buy. The other 97%, I mean, that's where the marketing role comes in to push them up into that sales conversation. And then there shouldn't really even be a close if it's the right time and they're the right prospect.
Completely agree.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to make a comment on that.
Let's say we have a stat that we frequently cite where it's like before they even fill out a form on your site or call for inbound, they're 60% of the way through their buying journey, right? They've done all their research, they've done all that. So by the time they're reaching out, they're a lot closer than you think to potentially buying. So when you have that, it's still you still don't push, right? You still don't like knowing that maybe at the end of their cycle, you're still not that pushy person. We had, I think it was the other day, we had like $500,000 in opportunities that was a year old that people still
Mm,
had open. And
mm,
when you dive in, I'm like, hey guys, what's going on here? Are these old? Are these decayed? Are you just holding out hope for no reason?
mm.
And then you actually go in and they're still active and they're still having conversations and they're just continuing to build that rapport and lean into it. And then the day after I flew that flag on the field with the team, they closed the deal from it. So
Yeah.
you're 100% right. As much as, whether it's 6 days from now or 6 months from now, it's a bit of the Wild West, but just maintaining that rapport, maintaining that connection is really the key.
When it comes to salespeople, hopium is the drug of choice for salespeople. How do you determine whether someone is going to be essentially a high value prospect that just isn't ready to buy yet,
Mhm.
and someone who is maybe more of a tire kicker? Maybe they check a lot of the boxes, but they're dragging their feet. How do you make that distinction of where to put your energy as a business development rep?
Yeah. So, and this is where emotional intelligence plays such a key role in
Mm,
sales, where this is the type of stuff you can't really teach. You got these reps that hold out hope that say, I'm going to close, $500,000 next month when they've never closed $500,000 in their life in a month. Right.
mhm.
And then you have your other reps that are a little more measured, a little more, they take that better approach where they can identify those tire kickers and not spend their time on them, right? You go for
Yeah.
no. When you hit a tire kicker, you're looking for reasons to disqualify. Theoretically, you should be looking for reasons to disqualify all the time. But when you really have a tire kicker, well, you find ways to get to budget faster, or you find ways to disqualify and move on and not waste your time while still being respectful, of course, because you
Mhm.
do never really know, right? You maybe make the threat or go for no, and then ultimately it kind of changes their attitude, and suddenly they have a fear of loss, and suddenly they come back and maybe they close. But it really, I mean, I'm personally here, I have a team of 20 folks under me. I'm definitely the squasher of hope here. I say, look, you have a very old pipeline. There's clearly some decay in here. Clean it up for me. Like, cause this is, we have to be realistic. You're throwing off our projections. I
Yeah.
have to go report this to the board, and I can't tell them we have this much in pipeline when I know 50% of it probably won't close.
Yeah.
So it's definitely it's a interesting dynamic where I have to come in and be bad cop a lot with a lot of these reps and squash hope. But your good reps are always going to have a very actively managed pipeline, right? They're not
Mm,
let sit in a certain stage for more than a certain period of time. And we have different stages based on like what do you think is the percentage to close, right? And so they'll kind of shift. Let's say you're hot to trot out of the gate, and you put them in the very likely to close bucket after the first call, the proposal review call. They go cold on you for a few weeks. Well, your better reps are going to actively navigate that pipeline and shift them down or shift them up if the opposite holds true. And that's how you get pipeline accuracy to forecast. And that's always a struggle, right? With an agency of our size. I know
mhm.
not a lot of the smaller, million, $3 million agencies are doing a ton of forecasting. You get to our size, you have to forecast and you ideally want it to be accurate. So your better reps are going to more actively manage that pipeline and have the emotional wherewithal to understand who's just stringing you along, right?
Mhm.
And who actually has a need in the short to midterm for our services.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that emotional intelligence piece is often overlooked, I think. And like you said, like you can't really sell a course on it. So maybe that's why it's not talked about as much. It's not as profitable, for someone who is just a huckster, I suppose,
Right.
trying to teach that stuff. But
Oh,
man,
exactly.
that is the golden glue, if you will, not the golden goose, but the golden glue. Speaking of pipelines and business development metrics, what do you feel like there's certain metrics that are being overlooked for lifetime value of a client other than just like traditional pipeline metrics?
That's a great question. Again, we've had to parse our data every which way over the past year because we're trying to make sense of what's changed. Like again, like pre 2024, it was pretty straightforward. Even in the face of the upheaval that was COVID,
Mm,
um, sales behavior didn't change overly much. You had some industries ramp, like we were very heavy ecom back in 2020, and so we
mm,
ramped really aggressively. We grew like 40% in a year.
Wow.
because we have an ecom focus. That's where a lot of the money went in that time. But for in terms of the metrics to look at with the past year and a half, we have probably parsed our pipeline 20 different ways to look at, it's not just necessarily about pipeline age anymore. Like I mentioned, we had $500,000 that was a year old. That's
Yeah.
actually still quite valuable, right?
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
2019, if somebody would have brought to me that, I would be like, no, you're like, this isn't a fit. Like, what's going
Yeah.
on? This isn't working. These people close in 2 to 4 weeks, almost like clockwork, right? Anymore, you look at about, maybe a 2 to 3 month close to a year now. So for us, pipeline age has much less of a bearing than it used to, right?
Mm.
If it's not necessarily an indicator of poor health, if it's an older deal. If anything, it actually might be a better deal. I have one rep that's been working a website
Yeah.
deal for a year. This has literally been a year long, like nearly $200,000 website deal that they're actively engaged. They're asking great questions. The scope has changed a couple times, but people are they're very much more selective than they used to be. So pipeline age has gone out the window as a metric of health. For us, it becomes very much around pipeline management and stage management. That's where I say
Yeah.
our successful reps very actively, they pay very close attention to their pipeline and actively manage it. What we found is that even more than like MQL volume anymore, because even
Mhm.
in the face of MQL volume dropping, our sales have stayed consistent. If anything, they've grown the past
Mm.
few months. And we're down. Organic MQL is like I mentioned, significantly more than
Yeah.
50%. But it's because these reps have had to be much more discerning around the opportunities that make sense and you have to put a lot more time into those. So it's a slightly higher quality of MQL that's coming in, which helps lower volume.
Mhm.
But then these reps they have to be a lot more discerning. These old school metrics don't necessarily hold water anymore. So you have to. It comes down to bit of that innate intelligence, that emotional intelligence, if you will, and then just active pipeline management. And beyond that, a lot of old school metrics are just dead. Not
Yeah.
dead. It's not saying SEO is dead. I hate that crap.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But they're not as prominent as they used to be. We'll say that.
Yeah. Yeah. Far less important. And I like what you're saying is, again, it comes back to emotional intelligence. Like there's not really a metric to measure that, but you were mentioning, are they engaged? Are they asking good questions? It's
Right.
hard to measure that sort of quality. One of the things that I've experienced in my business development career, the past decade or so is how, and I have an answer to this maybe, but I'm curious how you approach strategy to those who seem really engaged at first and then they drop off. The kids call it ghosting. Is there any sort of re-engagement strategy that you've seen consistently work or at least have a higher hit rate than others?
Yeah. This is something I've posted on LinkedIn before and I get pushback, but I'll stick by it because I see it work almost every time. Increased activity always yields increased results.
Hmm.
That to me is just biblical. Like it's something I see your more active reps who are more engaged, who have a stronger outreach cadence, even for those that ghost them. It comes down initially to cadence, to how often are you reaching out to them? Are you reaching out to them through other channels? If they're not
Hmm.
responding to your email, do you have your cell phone? Do you have their cell phone? Can you text them? Can you hit them up on LinkedIn? Your less successful reps just kind of they'll email every few days or once a week and try to loop them back in, and the messaging isn't necessarily unique or optimized, and that's a second component of it, right? But for
Hmm.
me, it just comes down to activity levels when somebody is theoretically ghosting you, right? In my sales career, and this isn't necessarily to toot my own horn, but I was, before I became the leader of the department, I was their top rep for many years. I never had anybody ghost me. Like I always got a no. I found a way to get a no, which
Hmm.
sounds very counterintuitive, and it's just because you stay on top of them. You do not give up. You're a rabid dog with a bone, right? You do not let go. That is
Yeah.
appreciated, I have found, right? And the people appreciate that. They expect you to try to sell them. You are doing your job by
Yeah.
following up with them, maybe somewhat annoyingly to an extent. But so to me, it's activity levels are absolutely, I mean, that's table stakes. On the heels of that is the messaging component, right? So
Hmm.
we work with the reps all the time around, look, don't just kill just following up and just checking in. Don't ever
Yeah.
say that. That's literally the worst turn of phrase you could ever use. That gets you an immediate delete when you hit my inbox and I'm a prospect and you're doing that. I don't need you to just follow up. Lead with value or just be direct. Just be like, don't like, hope you're doing well. Like it doesn't do
Yeah.
much. Or lead with direct, offer meetings. Like, did you get my last email? Like, so, and that's a bad example, but like something that's just more direct in their face. Like, I'm here to do a job. I'm doing my job, right? It's and you eliminate the padding, you eliminate the fluff, and you just go right to the heart of it. So to me, what I found is, and we just had it a couple months ago with an underperforming rep who rebounded after we switched up cadence and looked at on the messaging. We found the messaging was very repetitive, very dry. We
Hmm.
switched it up, made him be more direct. You start getting much better response rates, and some were no, and that's fine. Go get the no, get them off the books.
Yeah.
But that to me, it's a combination of those two things, and it sounds very simplistic. But I mean, it's not like sales has changed in even 100 years, right?
Yeah.
It's relationship rapport, consistency. I mean, it's all that hasn't massively changed even in the face of the AI, the world of AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
For
Simple, Simple but not easy.
Yes.
I'll share that something that worked for me literally this week. And I was messing around, but I did a small subset. I had 10 prospects that I was looking to, engage with. And these were prospects who had either done a demo or we had like a really good conversation that I met at events. So I've had either one or two like face-to-face contacts with them. They know what we're doing. They expressed interest very heavily, and they were just not responding after 6, 7 emails. And the 8th one that I sent, I said, "Hi, Jeff. Did I misinterpret something?
There you go.
I thought that you were interested in trying an engagement with us." And then I put a meme, like a GIF underneath it. That was the Obama one where he's sitting here like this. And he's like, and I was like, if that's still the case, I'm here to talk. And then my sign off was, "Blink twice if you can hear me, Austin."
That's awesome.
And out of those 10, 3 people submitted an order within 48 hours. It was amazing. Dude,
What a case study. Jeez.
I know, right? I'm going to make a LinkedIn post about it.
That's amazing. And that's the stuff that works. And it's like, you put it back
Yeah.
up to them, right? That's what you did. Like, did I misinterpret something? Like, that's
Yeah.
going to, oh, wow. No. Like, and suddenly you create this fear or this emotion that they're just used to you. Like, they're used to salespeople begging for the sale, right? And you reclaim the
Yeah.
power by doing that. That's brilliant.
Yeah. It was amazing. Go ahead and steal that one. No, just kidding.
I will say GIFs have worked for us though. I love a GIF. And
Oh,
I mean,
nice.
well, we haven't really
Yeah.
tested or anything. They do typically get high response rates because you can be funny with them. You can be a little tongue in cheek, right? Much more than just following up email.
Absolutely. And actually, I learned that from a different company. Actually, his name is Sabri Subi. He's a marketer out of Australia, big agency. His reps, I was actually engaging with them, and they had sent me some gifts, and those were the ones I engaged with.
There you
It
go.
was awesome. On that note, are there things that you're seeing in the marketplace right now that are clever, or you feel like is a they're on the cutting edge of business development that maybe you're considering or that you've just seen and you like working really well?
Well, there's a guy named Austin who just gave me this example of outreach I can do.
Follow him.
No, I mean, honestly, from a sales perspective, I will say the one thing that is likely the biggest change in the past couple of years with your typical mid-market SMB buyer is you don't really have to multi-thread at that level. It's typically one point of contact. It's the marketing
Mhm.
director, the business owner. You're not necessarily interfacing with the CFO, or you don't have to, maintain deck collateral for 6 different points of contact that you have to cater to in a presentation, right? That, as much as that is still the case for the most part of mid-market SMB, we are finding that they are looping in other, not necessarily stakeholders, but folks to help them make the decision. So it does become a little more layered, a little more complex. So multi-threading is actually finding its way into more mid-market SMB pitches, which has been interesting. Like even, I just had one the other day where a guy introduced his wife on a call. So now I have a husband-wife owner that,
Nice.
it's okay. I didn't know, she was not involved. He said he was a sole decision maker. Suddenly he pulls the wife on our next call. I'm like, all right, I have a new person I need to cater to that. And she was a financial mind. So now that's maybe a bad example, but like the reality is that people are pulling in a lot of other folks out to make decisions because there's this buying hesitancy in the face of the macroeconomic pressures, in the face of tariffs. It's just a much more challenging environment. So people solicit other opinions. So that's probably been one of the larger shifts where you have to develop multiple points of contact for multiple, I wouldn't even call them stakeholders, not always stakeholders. They're just people who the POC wants insight, wants input. So now suddenly there's another LinkedIn connection that needs to be made. And there's another, there's more outreach you need to do that you have to develop catered content for. So that's probably one of the larger shifts where we've had to become a little innovative in applying enterprise level sales tactics to more mid-market SMB that we never had to do before, just due to it's a much more challenging environment with all these pressures. And there's more decision makers at these, companies that are only going to spend maybe $2,000 to $3,000 a month with you, or even $1,000. And, there's 5 people you have to impress to get that.
Yeah.
So it's been an interesting evolution.
Yeah, that is interesting. The multi-threading. My favorite question to ask at the end of a demo call is, we've had a great conversation. Who else would have an opinion on this that I can include in the CC in our follow-up email? And typically they'll give me at least 1, sometimes 2 people. But again, we deal with all kinds of revenue markers. And I know we spent a lot of time on sales in this conversation, but I think, like you're saying, relationships are becoming more and more important, even offline relationships, especially as this post AI world develops and we're kind of questioning like what is real. That's why we're seeing more people consult different opinions and different perspectives. That's why we have to bring more people into the conversation. So I really appreciate you going there and and sharing what's been successful for you and kind of the landscape that you're seeing, Jeff. Where can we find more about you and about OuterBox online?
Oh, great question. Yes, follow me on LinkedIn. I tend to post somewhat obnoxiously there when I'm in the mood. I'll hit us up on OuterBox. Like I said, we've been doing this for 20 years, so we're kind of all over the place now. People still definitely confuse us with a phone case company, but I
Yeah,
assure you, we are a digital marketing company. And yeah, no, it's been good, Austin. I appreciate the conversation.
that's very good. Yeah, I appreciate it. And I do hope people reach out to you because you have some valuable and entertaining posts on LinkedIn. So thanks for being here, Jeff.
All right, thank you, Austin.